What's up, everybody? It's your boy Phelan back again for another episode of How to Get Away with the JD. It's kind of crazy being a little bit more consistent. I guess shout out to the Corona for forcing me to sit down and do what I said I was going to do this year. So this time around, I have some different guests that you guys haven't seen before, and we're going to get into a topic, but I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves first, and then I'll tell you guys a little about what today we're doing. So, Maikieta, you can go first.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Maikieta Brantley. I don't know what other details you might want to know. I'm a visiting assistant professor at the University of Denver Stern College of Law. I'm on a 2-year fellowship at that university. I'm a graduate of the University of Missouri 2017, and I'm licensed in Missouri and in Illinois.
A little rough to go after that. I'm Yoshi. 302 at UIC, what is now UIC John Marshall Law School, SBA president there. I will be starting my career at Kirkland and Ellis in Chicago as a transactional corporate associate, of course, pending what hopefully will be the bar in July, but we'll see about that.
True. So I got some accomplished guests with me this go around. So I pale in comparison, which is fine. But today's episode, we're playing Mythbusters. And by that, I mean we're digging into the world of big law. For those of you who are interested in law school, for those who are actually in law school, a lot of you have probably heard the concept of big law, big law, big law. Like your career development offices have probably pushed it on a lot of students without maybe explaining a lot of what big law is. You've probably seen it on like TV shows like Suits, different things like that, in terms of like, oh, big law, like it's this overarching thing that should be done. So today I have my guests with me because they both have different experiences with big law in some capacity. And we're just going to get into a conversation around that, try to educate you guys a little bit better about it, and then bust some of those myths behind there. So for those who are entering law school and maybe interested or thinking about big law and are kind of on the fence, you'd have a better idea. And for those who are in law school and still trying to figure out what path you want to take, you'll have a little bit more of an understanding of what it looks like in particular, maybe to go big law if that's something you're interested in. So I'm going to start off with a question for Maikieta. Maikieta, before you became a visiting professor, you actually worked in a law firm. And I don't know if that's something you've always wanted to do before becoming a professor, because I know your end goal is to be a professor. So what made you do big law out the gate?
So I think that it comes from the background of me being the first attorney in my family. So when I got to law school, that's all I saw. You touched on earlier about how CDO is always pushing big law. And if you're watching TV shows, usually you're going to see a big law firm. You're not seeing the solo attorney. So for me, when I was a 1L, I did several OCI interviews. And I just said, I'm going to go with the biggest firm. That's where the money is. And I didn't come to law school to not, make an income. So I actually worked my 1L summer at a firm called Shook, Hardy & Bacon. They're a national litigation firm. I was in Kansas City, which is not my hometown. So I was kind of a fish out of water. And I think that was my first look into, what it would be like to have a big law practice and live a big law life. But again, it was nothing that I wasn't in high school saying, oh, I can't wait to be this big law attorney. And I've never even watched Suits in my life. But when you go to a school and they're telling you, hey, this is where you need to go, this is where the money is, these are the best firms, this is going to start your career so you can do anything, it's kind of natural for someone like me who is the first attorney in my family to gravitate towards that.
And then Yoshi, I know you just told everyone you're starting in big law, but that's not actually where you want to end up long term. So why did you choose to start big law?
Just to kind of echo what's already been said, for me, same thing, first generation. And if I'm being honest, before even knowing about law school or even big law, it was always just attaining what's out there that's going to make me the most capable, most flexible, most appealing, I guess just professional or attorney in general. So I always knew I was going to go to graduate school. I just didn't know what. And so when I went to law school, picking what was first John Marshall, right? And you always hear the myths of if you're not in a T14 or if you're not at one of these one of the more prestigious law schools, that big law is the apple you can't reach for. Reach for the low hanging fruit. And for me, I've always been the person to go after what you tell me I can't. And so I kind of pushed the limit, and I hustled and I made sure that, at the very, very least, I was going after the best. And so I didn't know that was big law, or, you always hear about the conceptions of, oh, they're going to work you like to the bone. The competitive sphere, you don't want to be there. You're not going to have a work-life balance. But I made sure to do a lot of the research and asking questions myself. And to Phelan's point, I look to go back into sports, play baseball in my life. So that's just kind of the passion. That's where the passion comes from. And I knew starting at a big law firm would not only erase the thoughts and feelings of, oh, well, you didn't go to a T14 school, so that gives me the credibility. But putting a name like Kirkland and Ellis as what will be a transactional associate, I wanted to make sure that I had as much opportunity to grow, be trained very well, and to really build a solid foundation for whatever I decide to do in the late future.
So you both touched on important things, and I'm gonna break each one of those down in a second, but I want to start with one that's really important because none of us went or go to a T14 top 14 law school. And Maikieta has done very well for herself so far in her career. Yoshi is on his way to do very well. I have a job with the I think top 30 now business firm. So I think we're all pretty much on our way, and we're also minorities. So my question to you guys is, as both minorities, Maikieta also hitting on the double minority aspect, how do you feel when you're told that, oh, you have to go to like this certain school in order to do something? Or did you feel like you choosing the school or the path that you did sets you up for where you are now or plan on going?
Well, you can't tell me anything like that. I could really care less if you were to tell me where I go is going to inhibit what I do, because I chart my own course. So I'm probably not the best person to ask, because even if I would have went to a tier 3, I'd still be doing what I'm doing. That's just my mentality, my mindset. I will say though that it doesn't mean that I slacked off. When I went to the University of Missouri, I was in the top, I guess I graduated top 20% would have been my ending rank, started off around top 10. So I was hustling in law school. I was always in the library, always doing what I needed to do. So I didn't get here by any mistake. I was working to do it. So I think that for anyone, regardless of what type of law school they go to, you still have to be about your business. You're not going to get one of these big jobs if you're at the bottom of the totem pole. That just is what it is. We also know that the legal field is something where if you're connected, you're connected. I told y'all earlier on, I don't have any lawyers in my family. I'm not plugged up, okay? So I had to work to get where I am. And I think I steered away from what your question was, but in any event, I guess I couldn't answer it as well because I never had that mindset. When I was applying to law schools, I didn't think, oh, I need to go to Harvard, I need to go to Yale, I need to do this, I need to do that. Now, as a professor, I will say that it was a lot harder because I went to the University of Missouri. I had a professor at my law school tell me that the chances of me being able to go on market were going to be very slim because of where I went to school. But again, like I said, if you have the heart, if you have the drive, and you work hard and you do well, I don't think you should let those types of things inhibit you.
Yosh.
She hit it on the nose. I think after my 1L year, this question became as prevalent as possible, with so many people in my ear telling me that you need to transfer. It was a pretty, I think, well-made formula to transfer after a 1L year, go to like a Northwestern, UC, or wherever I know a lot of John Marshall students ended up going to Georgetown, or, just transferring out with the intention of doubling your chances to get into the doorway. But for me, I think my 1L summer, and while I entertain the idea, because I think I'd be stupid not to just at least research and go in to figure out what's the best for my career path. But for me, to the same point, it's a mentality thing. And I knew I had my foot indoors already. One being an intern, a summer intern at AT&T, a top 10 like a Fortune 10 company, having that on my resume, and then just having the screener interview already for Big Law. That to me told me I had my foot in the door. So what do I need to go to another school for to give me this? I felt like if I have my foot in the door, I'm going to bet on myself 10 out of 10 times. And that was really all it was. Like, it would be different if I didn't have an opportunity. That's one thing, right? If I wasn't even getting looked at, but if I had my foot in the door with a screener, I felt like I could do the rest, and working on the tail end to make sure that you're hustling, top 10%, same thing, right? Big Law wasn't the goal, but it was always just being the best me. And so being the best you means getting the best grades, means being the best networker, means developing all these relationships and opening as many doors as possible, and just weighing the options, right? Seeing what's in front of you, and then going from there.
I think both of you have hit on something really important. It all comes down to like your mentality. I don't think, hell, being in law school, I don't think you can have a mentality of letting somebody tell you what you are, who you are, because I don't think it'll work in the long run, especially in practice. For me in particular, like when I got into law school, I know like everyone else, I'm a first generation lawyer. Like, I cat out the bag, and I'm just like, okay, what are we doing here? And when it came time for 1L boot camp, and they were like really talking about like, oh, big law this, big law that, your grades this, your grades that, I was like, okay, big law is like what you have to do. I was really focused on trying to get my grades where they needed to go to do that. I wasn't in the top 10% of my class at the end of my first semester or at the end of my 1L year, but I wasn't at the bottom. And so I took my 1L summer, I clerked for a judge. I tried to figure out what I could do to better myself as an applicant. Not saying that big law, because big law is not my ultimate goal. Like, my dream job is to work for Apple corporate. But in order to get to certain jobs, you have to have certain things on your resume, either in-house experience or a big law experience. And that's just what they're looking for. And so for me, I never let my shortcomings stop me. And which is why I'm now Fortune 50 company. Like, I'm refuse to let somebody tell me what I can and can't do. And I've heard that for so long. So for anybody who's watching this, clearly, I think one thing to take away for sure is that your mentality dictates your trajectory in any career path that you choose, whether that's big law, whether that's public interest, whatever you plan on doing, you have to have the mindset that when you set out from jump, this is it, this is who I am, and stick to that, because sometimes it's going to get hard. Especially being in law school, like it's a hard journey. So never lose sight of like who you are and what you want to do in your end goal. To that point though, in terms of mindsets, I know like competition is a thing, and you've both spent time inside of a law firm for X amount. So how do you guys feel? Because like one of the biggest myths is like whether you're a summer associate or whether you're actually in practice, you're always going to be competing against your peers to try to get those top spots, whether it's partner, equity partner. So if you guys could speak a little bit to the competitive nature of what it is to actually be in a law firm.
Sure, I can touch on this. I will say that it's definitely important to like recognize that your network is your net worth. Earlier, you mentioned the fact that I'm a double minority, so it was very important for me to be mentored and guided by Black women attorneys. Black women attorneys, there, I believe we make up 2% of the attorney population. So already knowing that, most firms that I would walk into, I'm going to be one of tops 3 other Black people. So I will say that I learned early on that I hate saying the word disadvantaged because I don't think of myself as ever being disadvantaged, but I recognize that I'm not in the old boys club network. I'm not in the women's first network. I'm not in the of color network also is in my first network. Black women is my safe space. So I think in terms of competition, I was just very cognizant of the fact that, hey, I need to do what I can to show that I'm just as capable as my colleagues who don't look like me. There's that saying, twice as hard to have half of what, they have. And I think that that's something that I definitely experienced in both law firms that I worked at was, are you doing this because I'm your minority, quota for what's that thing where you can look and see how many, people of color work at the firm? Like, is that why I'm hired? And I had to go through a lot of navigating imposter syndrome to realize I am competitive. I am here because I deserve to be here. I didn't get this spot because my boxes are Black and female. And so I think you just have to know who your friends are. And that's everything. That's not even just in the law. I think even with my friends who work in other fields, medicine, general corporate business, know who your resources are. And I only compete against myself. I've never competed against anyone else because it's never gonna, this isn't a track meet. And even when I ran track, it was just me running to the finish line. I didn't care about the girl in lane 1 or lane 3. So long story short, I think that you're going to face competition. We know that from law school, but make sure you have a good network of people who have your back. And for me, that was my 2 most amazing Black women who are now partners at the firm I used to work at. So yeah.
I don't know why we have both of us on here. She's gonna say everything I'm gonna say, but I think it's important definitely to have allies like in the right spaces, like sponsors. I know we could talk about mentor and sponsors, right? Having someone who's gonna have your back and really just vibe for you, like really fight for you and put you in the spaces to achieve and excel, right? And to the point, like, why am I going to be looking at someone else? And I think that's the biggest thing about law school too. Like, it's a law firm, but you talk about law school, it's inherently competitive, right? Your grade isn't even based off of how well you per se know the material, but how well you know it based off of the person next to you. But if you're like consistently worrying about like, well, how well does this person know it? Like, I need to make sure I know it one more step better, right? Like, there's always going to be someone who knows it a little bit more or a little less. And I think you're going to stress yourself out and have a lot more anxiety by focusing on anyone else's race but your own. So I just put my head down during my 10 weeks, made sure I put my best foot forward. And I think it does come down to having some sense of confidence and faith in yourself and knowing that my race and whatever I put forward, as long as it's the best, is going to be more than good enough and better than everyone else's. You talk about Mamba mentality. Like, I don't really care about whatever everyone else is doing. It's really just, as long as I'm giving my best, I know it's going to be better than most, I guess.
So I guess this kind of like ties into that. So personality wise, I know, and I had a conversation with one of my mentors about this, and he's a little bit more old school, but in order to get like your foot in the door, do you, either of you feel like you've had to either mask your personalities or change something up about who you are in order to get in the door? Or do you feel like you've been able to stay consistent as a person and as a brand?
I'll let Yoshi go first so I don't take his stuff, and then I'll chime in.
That's a great question. I think I would never say that I've ever masked who I was. I think it's important to be aware of your environment and like know, like socially aware of what you're going for and what it takes to not necessarily fit but adapt to certain circumstances, right? I think going for a big law job is a lot different than going for a public interest job. Like, right, there's 2 different motives there. You need to like, so when you're interviewing, I'm approaching those interviews differently. And I think it comes down to being organized and prepared enough to know, okay, well, this is the culture that I'm stepping foot in, right? I would say adapting, though, is different than like changing who you are, because I'll be the first one to say, like, I don't really feel like I fit here. And so I'm not going to sacrifice the things that I've put on the top of my goal list or what I'm going after for a check or, just to sacrifice just my happiness. So for me, it's been making sure I'm adequately prepared more than anything and well-researched and well-organized so that when I'm going into any opportunity, and I think that was the same for law school, right? Brand is so important. And I think when I put my brand out there, so many people thought it was not who I was. And it wasn't authentic. If you ask anyone, 1L year, I was always at least in business casual, right? And people were like, this, like, who is this kid? like what, like, but for me, it was always like, this is my professional brand. I don't want to put anything else but my best forward. And I wanted people to know off rip that before I open my mouth, because I understand, right, what I'm going up against being an African-American male, right? I understood that walking into a predominantly white field, I couldn't wear sweats, because I would have been perpetuating a stereotype that I didn't create. But I'm socially aware enough, like, and I'm not that type of person to be like, well, I'm going to be the exact opposite. I'm going to make sure that although you think this is the stereotype, that I'm going to defy that by being exactly that, but showing you elsewhere. Now, I mean, like, you have to know what, like, being socially aware enough. And that's something my parents always taught me, right? Like, be aware enough to know how to not fit in, but to put your best foot forward. And I think, that being said, when I walked into law school, I knew that I was up against odds, and I wasn't against my own odds. It was what people placed onto me. But I knew how to counteract that. And I knew that putting my best foot forward and being different from the beginning was only going to give me the traction and the attention in a positive light. So that when I did get the credentials of the good grades, the jobs, that it wasn't all a fluke, because I knew from the beginning, like, this was my brand and this is who I was.
Yeah, I'd say I can't not be who I am. It's very apparent and obvious when I'm being fake, so I just can't do it. But what I will say is that it's very important to know your firm culture. And I think that's big law, solo, small practice, whatever, because it's the firm culture that's going to decide how you're able to navigate space. I will definitely say of the two firms I worked at, one was more, I would say it was more fun, more of a, we're going to drink at 3, but those same attorneys are also waking up at 6 a.m. and probably answering emails at 10, versus the other firm that I worked at, which was, pretty much just 9 to 5. Maybe we do a happy hour at 5 o'clock. That's it. Won't hear from you again until about 8 in the morning. So I think that in firm culture is really important, because that's where, your personality and knowing how to navigate those spaces is going to come into account. I have never been good at, as what they call, playing the game. It's just not natural for me. And it's probably why I'm in academia now, because I don't have that type of, I don't know how to describe it, because I don't knock people who are like that. Like, plenty of my friends can play the game, and they're going to be partners, I'm sure, one day, but that's just not me. So I think that anyone who's deciding that they're going to go the big law route needs to ask themselves and really have an internal conversation. Are you going to be this person that can live this way and interact this way for the rest of your life? I know I couldn't. So that's why I'm a professor now.
That's actually a really good point. I've heard that time and time again, especially from Maikieta, and Professor Henson. He will drill into my head until the day is cold that if you're not willing to play the game, why are you here? Like, why put yourself in these spaces? So I think Maikieta brings up a really good point. You have to ask yourself, like, are you willing to, because sometimes it's exhausting. It's extremely exhausting to try to continue to go back and forth and put one foot forward and then make sure that it's like a strategy game. It's like chess. Honestly, it's not checkers, it's chess. And if you make the wrong move in some extent, it can cost you a lot, or it can like take longer to get where you want to go. So I think that is a really good point to bring up. But then Yoshi also brought up something that I don't think many people think about: your brand on day one. For those who are entering law school, you'll hear this. For those who are in law school at some point, I'm sure you've heard this between your 1L to 3L year. It's about who you're around and like how they perceive you, because a lot of your classmates or upperclassmates, those are going to end up being like your network. Those are going to be some of the people who throw you cases or like refer you different things. So if you're not putting your best foot forward day to day in the building and you don't interact well with others, I don't know what it looks like for you in practice, to be completely honest. Like, it is a trial run in, at least depending on where you are, like law school, for what it looks like moving forward. So those are just some things I encourage you guys to think about as you're looking into whatever you're thinking about practicing. But another myth about big law, I'll say in corporate America technically, but I will focus on big law, is the work-life balance. And Yoshi, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Do either of you feel like you had to sacrifice one for the other during your time working in a big law firm?
Well, yeah, I can go, since I spent 2 years at a firm, and then I summered both 1L summer and 2L summer at big law firms. As a summer, I will say that was my life. I had already, prepped my family, boyfriend, friends, like, I'm trying to get a job, so you may not see me. I do think that as a practicing attorney, there is a little more flexibility in terms of when your work is getting done. But as a junior associate, you need to just prepare yourself to grind. And that's probably not what people want to hear, but don't let anyone BS you. You hear, oh, we have great work-life balance. Okay, well, actually show me. Billable hours are a thing. Our billable minimum for just salary was like 1,800, bonus was like 2,000, 2,100 minimum. So divide those hours and you can kind of figure out how work-life balance is going to be. And I don't think, at least my experience is that summer associate life is nothing like being a real attorney. I think that as a law student, you go and you're like, oh, it's exactly what it's going to be like. No, it's not the same. Those programs are made in a way to get you to come to the firm, to not be miserable, and to show the firm's best face. But once you're hired, there's no need to show you the best face. So I think that any person that's considering going to big law or work period needs to recognize that, hey, what you get in the summer may not be what it's actually like. So make sure you build those relationships with people that you trust while you are a summer and when you go on as a first year, so that you can have that open dialogue and make sure that you're being treated fairly.
Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, I don't really have the experience that Maikieta has because I was just a summer. And so I was definitely putting on the Kirkland 15, being wined and dined every day with our budgets. But I would say, it is part of being well-researched, right? Talking to what you will inevitably be a first year, second year, like see what their lives are like. And to be honest, right, what is the expected billable? And I think one other thing I'd probably want to debunk and myth is there is this thing out there that, no matter who you are, or if you're first year and you're expected to do, like, let's say 2,000 hours, what does that look like for a minority associate, right? Is it really the 2,000, right? Or is it you got to hustle a little bit more to show your value, right? But I will say that, one thing I did want to talk about is every firm does have a different culture. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, first and foremost, is Kirkland has an open assignment system, right? So being well-researched, knowing that, okay, there's this myth that as a first year, you're just going to be doing all grunt work or whatever. And that may be true, right? You got to learn the bare minimum and then you got to work your way up. But I think also with an open assignment system, no one benefits from being a jerk, right? The partners don't benefit because they would never get staffed on their work. And they give you the flexibility to figure out exactly where you want to plant yourself. And there's even cultures inside of practice areas. And so when you talk about like faking who you are, I think I found to fit more in a certain practice area more than others because that fit my persona, that fit my, like, how I worked. And again, different practice areas have different ebbs and flows. Like if you're on the transactional side of things, you may not sleep for 3 days because you're getting a deal done or whatever it is. But I think the overall feeling I have behind big law is I worked my ass off anyway in law school. So why wouldn't I get paid for working as hard, right? I was putting in 60, 70, 80 hours a week, my 1 year. So why wouldn't I do the same thing and get paid? I'm still young, I don't have a family yet. So I'm going to make the bread, work while I can, and then do whatever else comes as the priorities and lifestyle shifts.
True.
I just want to interrupt really quickly because Yoshi brought something up that triggered my mind when he said that there's different cultures within practice groups. And I learned that my 1L summer when I was at SHB because I really vibed with the IP people. I'm not a science person. I don't have my degrees are in accounting, but when I went to summer events and it was with the IP group, that's just who I vibe with. I think that's just like my internal, and they wouldn't be mad if I said this, like my internal nerd, like they do the IP for video games and stuff for Microsoft. And I was like, this is so interesting, but it's the type of people that do that have a certain personality. The type of people who are in lit have a certain personality. The type of people who are in transactional also have a certain personality. So I think you have to be really real with yourself about what is your personality. Estate planning, that's another personality group. So I think that will help anyone who's trying to figure out what they want to do is try to get to know some people in that type of a group, and it might, help you out in terms of where you would be the most comfortable and happy.
These are all really good points, and I hope you guys are taking notes or at least like listening in because there's a lot. This would typically be, and I've said this before, where we would take a break for sponsors and whatnot. But given the fact that ain't nobody giving out money like that, we're just gonna keep rolling. So Yoshi and Maikieta, since you guys are new to the show, typically now I would go through like listener letters. I do have some law students who like send in things. I also have some pre-law students who send in things. We just sit and answer some of their questions or hear their frustrations. Today I picked questions for us to answer instead of reading some of the frustrated letters. And one of the first questions is, what made you choose, this was directed to me, it's asked, what made you choose Mizzou Law, but I'll open it up. What made you choose the law school that you chose, and do you feel like you benefited from your decision?
So I am a very loyal person. I don't tend to leave things unless I'm unhappy. So I went to Mizzou for undergrad. I went to Mizzou for my master's, got in for law school, and I was like, all right, well, we're going here for law school. So I think for me, if it's not broke, I'm not trying to fix it. I think that in terms of where I'm at now in life as someone who's, I'm about to be in my third year out now, I'm a professor at another university. I would always advise that you go where it's the most affordable, and then as highest rank as you can go, I suppose. Even though we spent a whole like 20 minutes talking about it's your mentality is going to make your future, but hey, I mean, I think that would be something I would take into account now. And then I think that I built a lot of really good relationships. That's why I'm in the space that I'm in now. My recommendation letters for my fellowship were written by Mizzou Law, two professors at Mizzou Law, and the librarian, because I worked in the library. And I love Mizzou. I'm an MIZ Tiger till the day that I die. And I will also just go back to what Phelan said earlier about your network. I tell my students this all the time. Your professors are going to be the ones writing your rec letters. Your peers are going to be the ones that might be the clerks when you have a case that you need to get pushed through. So you just want to build your network wherever you go to law school. And so I did that at Mizzou. And I think that that's why I can say I had such a positive experience. I'm not sure that actually, I can tell you, I did not build relationships in my master's program, School of Accountancy. I don't know any of those people. I probably talked to one person, and you see, I'm not an accountant anymore. So I wonder how much that like plays into it. But I did not take the time to build relationships when I was in the School of Accountancy.
For me, it was definitely where I wanted to practice, but also like family was a big thing. I went to Mizzou, so we're all Tigers for 4 years. And then I came right back to Chicago because I missed the city, but I also missed family. So family was a huge part of that. Scholarships was a huge part of that. I was graduating Mizzou with no debt. So scholarships was big because I also took it as if I'm going to take any type of loan out, which I ended up doing, I'm gonna make sure that this is the investment that's like I'm investing in myself, right? It hurt to take those loans out, but for me, it was also the time where I sat down and was real with myself, and I said, okay, this is not a backup plan now. This is the plan. So again, going into mentality, right? And then I chose UIC John Marshall for a lot of reasons. One of which is our writing program is really great, but also just what is the brand outside of the school, right? So what is the reputation? We have a huge alumni network. We produce a lot of judges. So I think that spoke a lot to our brand. We have a practice ready mentality. And there's like a great experience that I heard firsthand in our open house, I believe. We have an ex-appellate Seventh Circuit justice that works at our school. And the reason she decided to work at John Marshall was because when she got students to clerk for her, we knew how to write. We knew what we were doing. And so just house that mentality of housing that sort of respect from professionals and attorneys and judges was huge. And so, again, a big part of it was, can I do everything that I want to from here? And even if it is working a little bit harder, right, the percentage of going into big law, which again wasn't my goal from the beginning, but that may scare people from going there. But again, if it was possible, I was like, that's all that matters for me. So I made sure to, like you just point, like network the hell out of that school, make sure I knew the teachers, make sure I got in good relationship wise, because again, that is your network. And don't burn any bridges, because again, who knows who the person was taking the test next to you, who, like, if they may be the judge you appeared before, or whatever the case may be.
All good. Thank you for your answers. Another question, and I think this actually works perfectly, is about law review. I'm gonna open it up to like journals, but since I know what both of you have done in law school, I'll focus on that. Do you feel that law review, put journals in there, is necessary in order to either clerk or go big law?
Yeah, I'd probably say yes, for sure.
I don't think anything is necessary, but again, I'm a unicorn. I was on journal, and I only did it because everyone was telling me I needed to do it. I did not enjoy it in the least bit. Exactly, right? So I will say that you want to, if on paper you're trying to set yourself up to be the best candidate possible, sure. But I don't think that anyone should let anything be the end all be all as to why they can't enter certain markets. But like I said, in terms of paper, yeah, that's what people are looking for when they are doing hiring. I can tell you that as an associate, when all our summers came, all of them were on some sort of journal or law review. So
Yeah, I mean, definitely to the point. I mean, don't let one thing define you. It's almost like a bonding experience. I would say if I was top whatever percent and didn't do it, I'd probably like get some sort of looks. I mean, because we all struggle through it. I don't know many people who say, yeah, like law review was the highlight of my law school career, or, you know, it was definitely like a rite of passage more than anything. And when it came down to just interviewing for jobs, especially from, I think, a John Marshall, or which again holds stigma. If I'm not, I can't sit here and lie to you. It was making sure I put my best foot forward and made myself as marketable as possible. And so it was almost like if I didn't do it, it sure would have probably housed more red flags, trying to get into some of the doors that I did.
I think for those who are watching, you all know how I feel because I've said it in a previous episode. Don't do journal. But I mean, do journal. Like, honestly, like law review has whooped me back and forth this entire year, but I am now on the e-board for next year. So I mean, like, clearly don't take everything that I say to that great magnitude, take it with a grain of salt. So I do think it is a stepping stone for sure, especially if you're interested in like corporate or clerking. I do think, though, I think it is a good experience in terms of writing. And then Maikieta, I don't know if you want to touch on this, but for like people who are interested in academia, it does give them a chance to be published, which kind of does that help a little bit? This is just like a rolling off question, but does getting published in like a journal help with anyone who's interested in pursuing going back to academia?
I would probably say yes and no, more on the no side. As an academic, our writing is not the same as a law student's writing. So while it will help because you could put that on your CV and it will still have your name and all that information, academics are looking for your publications in journals that aren't in your certain law school. But I do think that it would be very helpful in terms of you getting used to writing voluminous works, but I would have to probably ultimately say like nobody's really looking at your law school journal publications when you're trying to be an academic.
Yeah.
I hope that didn't sound too crass.
No, hey, these are all like, this is like I told you all in the beginning. This is how we think and feel. You guys can do whatever you please with the information, but this is just where we're at and from our experiences and different things. So those are going to be all the questions from the listener letters today. Thank you guys for sending those in. If anybody would like to send in a letter with questions, comments, concerns, anything about law school in general, pre-law students and law students, you can send those to alexanderthegreatpod@gmail.com for a chance for those to be read during one of the episodes and have your questions answered by one of my lovely guests. So we're nearing the end of the episode, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up this question because it is almost hand in hand when people talk big law is clerkships. Neither one of you pursued a clerkship prior to going into big law. So if you could touch on either why you didn't feel it was necessary, or like what made you choose to just continue without going the clerkship route?
Well, to be honest, it was about the money. I had no, and like Yoshi, law school was the first time I had a full ride for undergrad and my master's. So taking out loans from law school, I was like, oh no, I got to get rid of these things. So to go to the clerkship route and miss out on 1 year salary, it didn't work out for me mentally. I just couldn't justify that. And then I would also say that I did a winter clerkship through the University of Missouri, that was enough. I think I realized, I'm not meant to sit in anyone's chambers. And I think that if you have the opt to just have an offer right off the bat, and I mean, I know some people who deferred, they went and clerked and they love it. That just wasn't nothing in me wants to be a clerk. I don't want to be a judge. So it didn't lend itself to be valuable to my finances or my long-term career goals.
Yeah, so I guess I still have an opportunity to clerk. I know a lot of junior associates will go out and clerk for a year or whatever, but for me, just while I've been in law school, I actually had an opportunity. It's funny. So my 2L, when I was interviewing for my 2L summer jobs, I landed a clerkship with a couple of federal judges, and that's another myth. Well, not myth, but they tell you, you don't want. Well, once you get a federal clerkship, like you don't deny those. You don't deny really any clerkship opportunities. But I had a very unique situation where I was interviewing for multiple. I had let them know on the front end, like this is kind of a goal I have. But they offered me those spots literally on the spot. And it was a hard decision. So it was like, do I clerk for a federal judge? One of which was like that first African-American federal judge in Indiana, appointed by Barack Obama. And so it was like very, very enticing. But then I was like, or Kirkland. And, it was really about setting up my own career and figuring that like this is kind of the opportunity that doesn't come to students like myself. And really just what I wanted to do in the future. At some point I knew going into Kirkland and still having the opportunity to clerk, if that was something that was just so, gung-ho on doing, which I'm not really that sold on. I know it enhances the hell out of your writing, and that's always something that I could use. But going into transaction especially, like there were a lot of different factors that, of course, again, do your research, make sure you ask a lot of questions. That's one thing I definitely want to stress is like ask a lot of questions. Lower your pride, ask questions from your teachers, the lawyers that and keep, a seeking spirit. But the other thing I wanted to harbor that sort of came up from the conversation was, I started off with a partial scholarship, and then, now I have a full ride. So it's another part is like, what value do you bring in knowing your worth and your value? Because I pressed the envelope. I realized that I was a valuable asset to John Marshall, and I use that as leverage. I was like, I'm sure I can get into Northwestern and University of Chicago. Matter of fact, here are some of the things that they're looking for. Well, what does that give me, right? Like, again, pushing the envelope to the point where I knew that I offered John Marshall, from my own standpoint, a lot, but also what I was doing for the school and who I was and how I was representing the school was positive. So I used that to my benefit. And then, of course, the grades, right? I was getting the grades that warranted a full ride. So I kind of harbored on that, kept on it, and now I have a full ride. So definitely don't, wherever you start is the moral of the story is wherever you start, you don't have to finish that way. And at the end of the day, you write your own story and you write your path.
I 100% agree. I've talked to Maikieta about this several times, but I just don't, at the moment, I don't see clerking for me. I did the winter clerkship with Mizzou. I did an actual summer clerkship. So I was there all summer, just writing and writing and writing. And for me, where my personality, this goes back to personality, that's been touched on. I don't have the personality at this moment. I would also borderline say the discipline either to be a clerk for a judge. I clerked for a federal magistrate judge for the summer. I did Illinois appellate court for the winter. Like, I've seen some aspects of it, and right now where I'm at and what I want to do, it's either not necessary for me to necessarily clerk, or it's just not in my wheelhouse of a personality, to the point where I would be satisfied with sitting like the year out and not making a salary or different things like that, because like they've alluded to, law school is not cheap. And as somebody who had most of his undergrad paid for, and this is really the one that's kicking my bank account, yeah, there's certain things like I do it, like if I wanted to, technically I'm the youngest in terms of schooling, so I have more time to consider a clerkship. But it just depends on, I think it depends on who you are as a person, where you want to go, and what you want to do. So for those who are like either weighing clerkships, have probably heard about clerkships and not too much in detail, I think that's something I really want you guys to think about. Where do you want to go later on in life? There's a lot of clerkships that are very beneficial. I have a friend who's now going to clerk at the Missouri Supreme Court after she graduates next May. So it just depends, and that's the legal answer to this question. It depends. We're going to keep it moving, right? So one last question about one of the bigger overarching myths in big law comes down to diversity. Between your fellow associate class, summer class, the equity partners in the firm, do you feel that there is a lack of diversity from top to bottom, or do you feel that a lot of positions are being handed to get the diversity without doing much to retain or promote said diversity in the firms?
Yeah, so I've actually written about this, and that the issue isn't diversity, attracting diverse candidates. The issue is the inclusion of diverse candidates and therefore the retention of diverse candidates. So you have someone like myself who came in, I started with 4 white men and me, and I'm gone. So what does that say about, my experience? Obviously I had other, goals, but diversity definitely was an issue. I think that most law firms are going to have to get really real about how they retain their diverse candidates, if they're being inclusive of their diverse candidates. And, from some research I've done for my writing, is that I'll speak to African Americans because that's what I am, they're burnt out. So by the time they get to these spaces where they can help other people, it is hard for them to actually want to put in that energy in trying to help retain, a new diverse candidate, because one, they don't, if they're, a good friend to you, they're not going to lie to you about their experiences. And 2, it's a lot of effort to try to mentor someone, mold someone just for them to leave within 18 months. So I will say that that diversity aspect is lacking from all sides of, from equity partner on down to summer associate. And if anyone is interested, Harvard has a great study on this, particularly with African American women. And if they used Harvard's law class, and they saw overwhelmingly that Black women who went to Harvard did not stay in big law. So I think that that's something that we should think about, that even if you've gone to the best school and you're the brightest of the brightest, we can still have issues with respect to how we feel included. And more often than not, Black women try or end up in education. And I think I could talk about that for hours, but I think that there's something to be said about why, as a Black woman, I've navigated to the academic space, because I feel like in academia, it's just, I don't know, I don't feel the same skin color issue. It's more of an hierarchy in terms of who's tenure, who's, emeritus, and who is visiting, who's a fellow, etc. But I've never felt it in terms of I'm the Black professor and there's the white professor amongst colleagues. Students, different story.
I don't know if I have much more to say after that. Real talk, I do think retention is a huge part of diversity. And when you talk about big law, especially, right, they're throwing so much money that if you don't stay a certain amount of years, you are not a good investment, right? I mean, because they're losing money if you leave within the first couple of years. So I think they realized that. I think when you talk about diversity, it's more than also just skin color. It's also the diversity of schools, right? I mean, at some point, you're only attracting from these 3 or 4 pipelines of schools, and you would only get your diversity from, let's say, a Howard or, a HBCU. And so I think that's important. I still think that there's a level of diversity come from the knowledge and skill set and the practical aspect that each school has to offer, which is something that I think I've been a proponent of and sort of highlighted for my firm especially. But I think that's important, right? You have to feel comfortable, and that still fits in the culture. I mean, I think I'm in a little unique position. I mean, I'm in a huge firm. I mean, my class was 60. So when you talk about, uh, you know, being alongside 4 or 5 others versus 59, 60 others, right? I think we had maybe 10 or so African American. I don't know. I mean, Kirkland's doing like what they can. I feel comfortable. I think I know. I've been a very big proponent of making sure that the door I've been able to go through widens. Because again, even if big law isn't for me, I think my impact is felt by making my presence known and knowing what it takes to attract other individuals that, like, maybe this is your bread and butter. Maybe it is like you want to be there to start and finish your career. But I think giving people the opportunity to do such, and I think some people just use it as a stepping stone. But regardless, diversity and the inclusion part of diversity, it plays the exact role to retention. And so, to the point that's been made, I think that's really the key aspect here, is what are firms doing to keep their diverse candidates when you don't have those candidates at the table. Like, that's going to be a moving target forever if you don't have the right people in the right rooms and the right spaces to speak up on what we're looking for. And so if we don't have people who inevitably look like us from top to bottom, then how can you imagine staying somewhere where you don't even fit into?
Hey, no, that's actually super real. But before we get out of here, I typically ask all my guests one question. But before I get to that last question, both of them have been rather humble this entire time we've been on this podcast and recording. So I'm going to bust each one of them out really quick. Starting with Yoshi, I spent 2.5 hours on one of Yoshi's platforms. For those of you who have never met Yoshi, he is a great person for you to get in contact with, especially my law students who are like interested in doing something in the realm of what he's doing. Great person to have contacted because he's like super connected. But he runs a page on Instagram that I'm gonna let him shout out, and some of his other work, because Yoshi has a platform for law students as well in order for them to like have their voices heard. And then Maikieta also does some things on YouTube, but she does law-oriented things, but she also talks about like her journey. So if you've been interested by anything that she has said, make sure that you guys follow her on all social media platforms, and also make sure you subscribe to her YouTube channel, because a lot of the stories that she posts up there, she's spitting some knowledge, and I think a lot of people should really hear that. So Yoshi, if you want to shout out your brands, and then Maikieta, if you want to shout out your brand, we can get the people connected, because I feel like you didn't mention it, and I feel like it's necessary.
I'm not here to take away from you, brother. I will say that first and foremost, right, I think a huge part of all of this is we're not in competition with each other. Like, there's a lot of different resources out here, and the reason we're all doing anything of the sort is to help others, I'm sure. And so there's no such thing as going to one person, one source. Like, be well informed, right? And so the fact that you have podcasts, Instagram profiles, YouTube channels, right? Like, there's really no excuse now. And it's something that, again, it came from the idea of, I wish someone did this for me, right? And so I think using my platform and just my network, I birthed what Phelan's referring to, the Law School Mentor on Instagram. And I use that platform really to just use my network and put my network out there and give students, future students, whoever, a chance to be a fly on the wall of what would be sort of a one-on-one coffee session. I love networking. I love having conversations face to face. And so I know a lot of students don't, right? I've talked to so many students, like, how do you do what you do? And if you can't, I gave people a platform and sort of the access to my network, because I also realized that as I've met so many individuals, that I can't really utilize them or really just keep in touch how I want to. And so if I can pass my network on to someone else, or give you that level of access, knowledge, or wealth that I've been able to garner, then let me pass that on. And so I give students or whoever who tunes in an opportunity to ask the questions you want answered, give different practice areas, put them out there. And so you can really just ask questions behind the screen, right? I do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is type away a question, and we'll get it answered for you, right? And you can learn from other people's experience. You can be a fly in the room of someone maybe you didn't ever see possible to sit down with before law school, or, and to give you access. I think that's the biggest thing, is using my platform to give others access, because people have done that for me. The only other thing I'll shout out to is I started a nonprofit called Encourage You to spread positivity, encouragement, motivation, and inspiration. So I run a nonprofit as well in law school. So when anyone tells you you can't do something, like, you can definitely do it. It's just a matter of being organized enough. So tune in, feel free to ask me any questions. I'm more than available, and very accessible. So thank you for having me.
What's your social media?
At the Law School Mentor, at Encourage You To, and my own is at Yoshi Haynie.
All right, y'all. And so my socials on YouTube, you can find me at lawtravelglam. I talk all things law, travel, and glam. Unfortunately, since we're doing the corona right now, my travel has halted, but I'm still putting out content. You can also follow my Instagram profiles at Traveling Law Pro, where I just post myself traveling because I'm a law pro. And you can also follow my personal Instagram, that's at my Brantley. And then my last plug will be for any law student out there to check out Quimby. I'm a CLE presenter for Quimby. Excellent resource that I didn't even know about when I was in law school. They have some really good videos. So if you look at some of the CLEs, you might hear my voice. So I definitely think you should look into some alternative resources that maybe weren't articulated to you through, whoever your law school mentor was or people around you, because I'm amazed at what I've been able to find on the internet that I had no idea existed when I was in school. So again, you are more than welcome to ask me questions. My personal Instagram, again, is at my Brantley.
All right. Now that I feel like I've covered the basis for both of them, I do have one question that I always ask all of my guests. And it's, what is your biggest piece of advice for a pre-law student and then a current law student? And you guys can pick whoever goes first.
To my pre-law student, I would just encourage them and remind them that they are a pre-law student. I would not do anything extra that I have to do before I get to law school. Law school will be the time to be a law student. While you are a pre-law student, enjoy college, have fun, do all the things that you want to do, and then be refreshed for when you start law school, whenever you decide to start law school. But I think if you're a pre-law student, lower some of that pressure on yourself, do what you need to do to get in where you want to get in. But other than that, let it go. And my law student, my biggest piece of advice is to not burn any bridges. Now, I don't mean don't stick up for yourself or don't unnecessarily avoid conflict, but realize that your network is your net worth. And I'm living proof of that. I'm still relying on connections that I made my first year of law school. I'm still relying on the reputation that I built with professors while I was in law school. So just know that that reputation is, to me, everything.
Awesome. So I think to my pre-law students, it's definitely enjoy your time beforehand, because this is truly a commitment, a lifestyle, everything in between. But make sure that this is what you really want to do, right? I don't think law school is a backup plan and you're spending too much time, money, and effort to have this be that. So make sure that you're well-informed, well-researched, and there's always, the advice I always give students is, I understand it's a wealth, like it's almost like drinking from a fire hydrant, all the information that you get, but please be well-informed, right? At the very least, know the opportunities out there, know the resources that your school has, know the things outside of your law school, the events, the networking, like all these opportunities, so you can at least make the informed decision whether you do or do not do something. So ask a lot of questions. Like that's something that has been monumental, especially being a first generation, is I know who I am. I knew what got me to where I am. So there's no need to change that. It was just a matter of asking the right questions, asking them from the right people, and knowing myself enough to know what I need to take from every success story and molding them into who I was. And so a couple of books I would almost suggest that were huge for me was, one, A Student's Guide to Law School by Andrew Ayers, and then The Law School Hustle by Ashley Kirkwood. Huge for who I was, and just gave me the right mentality to approach law school. And then so my second point to the law students is mentality, right? I think it's your perspective, it's your hustle, it's your grind. It's not the grades that's going to separate you, because between a 4.0 and a 3.7, we're equally as competent. It's going to be the perspective and the mentality that you house that separates you. So, remember to stay positive, own your journey, and continue to hustle, right? And you'll figure out how to get away with the JD.
I see what you did there. But those are all the questions that we have. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. As always, as a visual podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube, and then make sure you stream wherever you get your wherever you get your podcast. I really need to work on my words. Wherever you get your podcast, Apple Music, Spotify, so on and so forth. We thank you guys for taking the time out to listen to us today. Hope you guys learned something. Make sure to follow both of them on their social medias, which will be in the description at the bottom of this episode. And once again, thanks. And we'll see you guys next week. Peace.